The Trump administration is radically reshaping America and the world around it. In the inaugural Vantage Point essay from Australia Institute Press, Dr. Emma Shortis examines Trump's grim vision for America and the future of the Australia-US alliance. Pre-order your copy of After America, Australia and the New World Order, or become a Foundation subscriber to Vantage Point at australiainstitute.org.au/store or via the link in the show notes. Hello and welcome to Dollars and Cents, the Australia Institute podcast where we're talking about just what the hell is going on in the economy. I'm Elinor Johnston-Leek, the senior content producer here at the Australia Institute, and as always, I'm talking to our chief economist, Greg Jericho. Hello, Greg. How are you?
I'm good, Elinor. Hello, and how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. You know, surviving the election.
Surviving the election
campaign.
And our big 3-day week that we're just having to struggle through.
Well, look, the work never stops, Greg.
It doesn't. It
No.
doesn't. And neither does this election campaign.
No, it doesn't. And we've got some new things to talk about when it comes to the election campaign. Something we haven't really talked too much about so far, defence spending.
This announcement today, which is a record announcement into defence of $21 billion.
We're focusing on increasing our defence spend. We're focusing on bringing lethal capabilities so we can deter our enemies.
Don't forget the government hasn't contributed $1 to AUKUS. Not $1. Additional has been put into the defence budget.
And we have the most dangerous strategic circumstances since the end of the Second World War.
You don't achieve peace through weakness.
Greg, what's this $21 billion actually buying?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And fortunately, we have got an opposition that just loves giving details and explanations of their policy. Look, they're planning to spend $21 billion between now and 2030. And I always hate it when any policy is between now and a certain date because you're always like, is that including that date or is it before 2030? Or it's a bit like, are we going to jump on 1, 2, 3? Is that on 3 or?
Yeah. We need the details here.
And so 21 billion, let's say by 2030. So we're talking about $4 billion a year, which ain't nothing.
No.
What's it going to be on? Well, fighter jets is a big one.
Okay.
Some more joint strike fighters apparently, because Australia has been involved in so many air wars over the last 70 years. So they'll come in handy. Also, some drones, obviously. Apparently, putting more money into AUKUS because $360 billion just ain't enough for submarines that we're never going to get. And also, hilariously, is that some of the money will be used to help lift recruitment, which is like, okay, but, how's that going to...
Yeah, is that
what, they're going to
or...
big advertising spend? I mean, I guess they could raise the pay of soldiers. I don't know. But, it's a lot of boys with very expensive toys, very macho sort of thing that was done in the announcement over in Perth with Shadow Defence Minister Andrew Hastie, who has fairly well been unsighted during this election campaign, which is a bit surprising given defence has been sort of around the edges with the issues with Russia and Indonesia and things like that. The reports out of the West Cape that around his own electorate, all of Andrew Hastie's sort of campaign call flutes and so forth, weirdly don't have the Liberal Party anywhere mentioned on them, which is an interesting thing for someone who definitely has his eyes on becoming leader of the Liberal Party one day. Yeah, look, it was our great colleague Alan Beam, and he's written a column in Guardian Australia this week on this announcement, kind of just tears it to shreds because it's just, it's just more money for stuff, but there's no coherency to it. There's no underlying reasoning for it. There's no sort of urgency in the sense that, we've got Collins submarines that do need to be replaced, but there's no urgency of replacing them, even though we need submarines. And so we're all going for these nuclear submarines, which we're not going to get. And even if we do get them, we're not getting them for ages, and they're not going to serve the purpose that we need them to serve. Other than that, great policy.
It's also $300 billion.
360.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Plus whatever. Yeah. There's been a big fight over defence spending. The Liberal Party is saying that Labor cut defence spending by $80 billion.
Labor Party's ripped $80 billion out of defence at a time they tell us that we should be trying to bolster our defences. And
it's really much in line with the way the ALP are also saying that the Liberal Party, back when Joe Hockey came in, cut $80 billion out of health and education. What it really comes down to is when back in 2013, Liberal Party had a policy for spending on education and health, and the Liberal Party came in and said, no, we're not going to do that policy. We're going to basically lessen it by $80 billion over a decade. So Labor claimed that as an $80 billion cut, which, I mean, yeah, it's in the budget papers saying that that's what they do. The Liberal Party say, no, we didn't do that. Our spending always went up. And then you flip it and we get to defence and it's exactly the same thing. The Liberal Party had policies in place for defence spending to go up by a certain amount. Labor went like, no, we're not going to go up that fast. And so the Liberal Party is saying, oh, look, you're cutting defence spending. And the Labor Party said, no, it keeps going up. Yeah, it's all this hilarious.
And a good point that you brought up in your column in The Guardian this week, you're talking about, all this money to defence. And coming up to Anzac Day, it seems sort of perfectly timed, maybe on the Liberals' part. But you were talking about what the idea of the Anzac legend is all about and what this is all defending, the idea of, defending the Australian fair go. But what should our politicians be doing to protect that isn't just spending billions of dollars on planes and missiles?
Yeah, and actually, Alan Beam, again, kind of nailed it in that it's kind of rather gross that the Liberal Party decided this week, the week of Anzac Day, which is notionally about commemoration and remembering sacrifice and sort of almost, the spirit of it is never again, that the Liberal Party's defence policy is all about putting us on a war footing and thinking about we need to have, offensive missiles and actual attack weapons rather than, okay, that doesn't. It's not really in the spirit of Anzac Day. It's more like, let's treat Anzac Day as this jingoistic day of celebrating power and military might, which is rather uncomfortable for me. And I note in my column that I always I hold Anzac Day fairly dear because my dad did fight in the Vietnam War. He was a Nasho, as they say, and did national service, which means his date was pulled out of the lottery balls, and it was always something that obviously I grew up knowing about. It was only about 10 or so years ago that the Australian War Memorial, put up on their website all of the lottery number, all of the lottery dates, so you could go in there and I could actually see, oh yeah, this was the year in which his lottery was done. And yep, sure enough, there's his birthday. And I sort of was looking at the birthdays going, oh, yeah, that's it. And then I got to May. I'm like, oh, God, there's my birthday as well, which kind of really struck me that if I'd been born the same year as my dad, my, birthday would have also come up, which was kind of really brought it home just how arbitrary and cruel the whole thing is. And it's something that we here at the Australian Institute have kind of been talking about in this sense that, not Anzac Day or conscription, but this sense of there's this awfulness about how we talk about nationalism, how we talk about patriotism, how we talk about pride in your country that is always loaded with very, let's just say it, John Howard kind of views of things, very conservative views of things. And we're like, no, get stuffed. I'm progressive and I'm proud of Australia. I'd cheer as loud for the Matildas and the Socceroos and, everyone at the Olympic Games. And I do think I'd much prefer to live in Australia than anywhere else. I think there are great things that I'm proud of our history. Things, however, that when you look at it through the jingoistic view of things are often not valued at all. And I'm like, well, what do we talk about when we talk about what we value about Australia, what we think Australia is worth defending? What do we sort of, stand up straight and sort of think, yeah, that's Australia. That's what I want Australia to be. And it's like, okay, we hear a lot of that on Anzac Day and every other day. And during this election campaign, both Albanese and Dutton have been saying Australia's the greatest country on earth and all this. Okay, great. But what do you mean by that? And if it's things like, the fair go, the fact that you don't let your mates down, it's okay, are we seeing any of that in our policies? Are we seeing any of that reflected in, something like our taxation system, like the fact that, as I point out, we've got one of the lowest age pensions in the advanced economies, and more than a quarter of women over 65 live in poverty. Now, is that Australia's fair go? Is that us being this great egalitarian nation where no one's left behind, you always stick up for your mates? I'd say, no, it's not.
Yeah, and the environment, like Australia's natural environment, the Great Barrier Reef, our unique flora and fauna are brought up a lot, but, what environmental policies are we, using to protect those?
Yeah. I mean, the politicians, they'll recite bloody Dorothy McKellar's really maudlin poem,
Wide
which I
brown
hate.
land.
This great wide brown land for thee, and all this. And it's like, but you're letting the Maugean skate go extinct, like literally, because of some foreign salmon companies or fishery companies who pay bugger all tax in Australia, employ very few Australians, and our bravery, our sacrifice, our wonderful defence of Australia is giving those companies a free rein to cause one of the oldest fish in the world to go extinct. And on the other side of the continent, we've got the Murujuga rock art, which, we should be, when I say I'm proud of Australia, I'm as proud of that. When I read a story about, I can remember when it was first really came to prominence quite a few years ago, and reading about it, and it being pointed out how it was older than, the rock art caves in Spain and France and things. I'm like, suck it, guys. We got the oldest culture.
Well, that it contains what might be one of the first depictions of a human face.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, that's freaking great.
It's incredible.
And it's like, that's something I actually get really proud about. And yet, are we treating that with anywhere near the amount of pride and defense that, anywhere in Europe would treat a similar sort of cave art or historical monuments or things like that? No, it's like we're the type of nation where, if we had pyramids, we'd be like, but is there gas under there? And if there is, do we really need them? And even worse than that, we wouldn't even charge for the gas. So it's this thing of, great guys. I love hearing you say, I'm proud of Australia. I love Australia. Australia's the greatest country on earth, and we need to defend it. Fine. But what are you defending? And are your policies actually reflecting that, or is it just bullshit talk? Is it actually, we'll defend Australia's interests until a foreign mining company says, actually, how dare you even suggest that we should have to pay for royalties for the gas that we're getting? Or how dare you suggest that we should actually be taxed on our super profits that we're making from your gas that we get for free? How dare you do that? And then you see the politicians' bravery just go to complete water. I mean, and what really kind of spurred this was in one of the debates, Peter Dutton was asked about climate change, and this was the debate where he, admitted that he didn't want to suggest that climate change was real, and you couldn't say climate change had things to do with it.
We get a lot of questions about the concerns that people have over more intense weather events, be it storms, fires, floods, particularly in your home state, Queensland, Mr. Dutton. Do you accept that we are already seeing the impact of climate change?
Well, David, there's an impact. The question is what we can do about it as a population of 27 million people.
Is it getting worse, though? Is it getting worse?
Well, I'll leave others to...
What do you think? You're a Queenslander?
Well, I'll let scientists and others pass that judgment.
But he pointedly said, but what should we as a nation of 27 million say? What can we do about it? I thought, Yeah, that's really the Anzac spirit there of,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, we're a small nation, so no, we can't do anything. It's like, no, we're a small nation and we can do things. We're important. We should be respected. We should act like we are important. Instead, as soon as it gets to something like climate change, all that talk about, Australia's greatest nation on earth, we're better than any other nation in the world, suddenly becomes, we're only 27 million. Don't force us to do anything. It's like, Jesus. And it really just comes through that all this talk is just crap. And instead, and it's why we here at the Australian Institute are really kind of pushing, let's be patriotic. Let's be even, dare I say, nationalistic, but nationalistic about great things, about the fact that Australia was the first place to have the secret ballot, was great, a leader of women's suffrage, has an amazing culture that should be defended, has an incredibly fragile but amazingly unique environment that really needs to be defended, and we should be absolutely leading the charge to do anything on climate change because it's our country, literally, that is under attack from climate change. All of these things, fair go, great. I'm on board, so let's actually make sure that we, tax big companies so that we can pay for education and health and keep people out of poverty. These are the things that we should be really proud about and saying, if you're not brave enough to enact policies that actually live up to your words, then, well, does that make you a coward? I kind of think it does.
Well said, Greg. Shut up. Look, I'm trying to pivot. Hang on.
All right, pivot.
Speaking of debates, we've had another few since the last episode. There was another one between Albanese and Dutton. There was another Treasurers debate between Labor Treasurer Jim Chalmers and Liberal Party Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor.
You've got to slash the unnecessary red tape. We've seen overreach from regulators in sectors like financial services. We've seen that with APRA.
The most important thing that we can do in this difficult global environment is make our economy more resilient. And we make our economy more resilient by rebuilding incomes, tax cuts for every Australian taxpayer, rolling out ongoing cost of living relief.
You wanted to raise taxes, unrealised capital gains on Australians' superannuation. You're going after it, Jim. Okay, and we know he's done the work to go after negative gearing and capital gains tax.
Wanted to ask about the Treasurers debate. This is an economics podcast. You did some posting to our live blog as the debate went on, I saw that you were sometimes posting in all caps, and one of the posts was headed, quote, "Good Dolly, this debate is so stupid." I have two questions. Firstly, was that Dolly Parton you were referring to? And secondly, was it actually that bad?
I can't take credit for the O'Dolly. That is very much Amy Ramikas.
That does sound like Amy Ramikas, yeah.
Who often bows to her saviour, Dolly Parton, who, let's be honest, is international treasure and we should protect at all costs because she's just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was an interesting debate because of where it was held. It was not held at the press club because pointedly Angus Taylor has refused to debate Jim Chalmers at the press club, where he would be asked questions by all of the press gallery big names, the people who actually kind of know a bit about policy.
So where was it hosted?
It was hosted by the Business Council of Australia and the Small Business Organisations of Australia. Sky News' Laura Jays was hosting it.
Do you think that might have sort of coloured the tone of the questions that were asked?
It was really home ground advantage for Angus Taylor. Not that, I don't really care who wins or loses these things, but what was infuriating for me watching it was everything was loaded to the belief that businesses are the most important thing in our economy. We need businesses to be profitable. All the questions were actually from small business owners or people who work for businesses. And it was all, how can you cut our tax rates? And how can you make sure that the instant asset write-off is permanent and bigger so we can pay less tax? And, and about those IR laws, can you make them easier and lower for us so that we can make more profit? I mean, and it was
doesn't really sound like much of a public debate.
No,
really.
It was very much divorced from, I think, any voters, really. It was all about business. It was all about profit and, we got to get debt down and things like that. And it was just, good thing was it was on Sky News, so no one watched it except for four unfortunate people like me who was doing it as part of his job. But it just really highlights how who you're talking to really affects what frame everything has.
Yeah.
And also, think about this. The only reason Jim Chalmers said was that he knew this is a rigged game. The only reason he went, because if he didn't, Sky News and the Oz News Limited would have all made a big thing about, he's dodging the thing, doesn't like business, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And they would have given Angus Taylor a free hit. They would have given him an hour of just talking about how great business is and how bad Labor are. So Jim Chalmers went, but, imagine if we flipped it and say the ACTU were hosting a debate. There's no way Angus Taylor would have gone. And if he didn't go, there wouldn't have been a big story about it because everyone would have gone, well, of course he's not going to go. And, but it's this sense of, oh, no, it's business. They're not biased. They're not.
They're sensible.
Yeah. And they're straight players. This is the BCA that, for many election campaigns has campaigned against Labor Party IR laws, famously campaigned against Labor Party climate change policies. And it's like, oh no, we've got to front up and talk to these because they're special, they're important,
they wear suits and ties.
Yeah. And I was just, I was doing my fact checking that, and then by the sort of the 70th minute, I was just, this is actually pretty gross.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of sick of this is how apparently important people think we need to talk about the economy. It's like there was no mention of workers, no mention of people, no mention of anyone living in poverty, no mention of these things like equality. And instead it was all, what can you do to cut my tax because I'm a struggling business owner? Cut my tax. And it was just not something that I think is a good place for the economic debate to be.
All right. Well, glad I didn't watch that debate then. And that's probably all we've got time for today, Greg. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elinor, and thank you everyone for listening. Really appreciate you listening to us, whether you're on holiday or whether you're driving to work or whether you're at work and you're just listening to us on the Sneaky Peek. That's great. We will be back, I can tell you, with another episode of Dollars and Cents next week. And a bit of a spoiler, CPI, the inflation figures are coming out next week, so that will be a big thing in terms of are we going to get interest rate cuts, which we should be getting. And also we're going to do a bit of a part Q&A from our listeners. So again, if you've got any questions you'd like us to talk about, especially with regards to sort of election policy, flick us an email at podcasts@australiainstitute.org.au or just hit me up on Blue Sky at Grog Scammett. But probably the email is the best one so we can get a nice list. So that's for next week, but this episode of Dollars and Cents was recorded on the 24th of April, and some things may have changed. You can find my column, Grogonomics, which looks at what exactly are we defending when politicians say we need to defend Australia, on the Guardian Australia site. And for more research, including our wonderful live blog, which Amy Ramika is just knocking it out of the park, you can find that on our website, which is at australiainstitute.org.au. As always, our theme music is by Blue Dot Sessions. Everyone, have a great week. We'll see you next week for the last week of the election campaign. See you all then.
See ya.